Joshua, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here at the Great Wave, our hybrid festival of the House of Beautiful Business. First of all, how are you doing and where are you right now?
Now I'm inside my office, and as a few days ago, I just went to the court to attend a court hearing, which was really exhausted and also implying how the threat from the authorities towards activists in Hong Kong.
So this year, 2020, has been a really eventful year for many people. How do you personally feel about this year and what has happened?
I think 2020 is the remarkable year because for countries around the world, all we experienced the outbreak of COVID-19, and it also implies how the coronavirus export from mainland China, Wuhan, to countries around the world, and without the check and balance and transparency, how China continue to lie to the world and trigger more and more outbreak of the pandemic happen around the world. And it also led people to experience what is meant by the wolf warrior diplomacy of China towards especially European countries.
And tell us maybe a bit more about you, if that's okay. So we'd love to hear more about your upbringing. Where and how did you grow up, and when and how did you develop your interest in politics?
I developed my interest in politics start from 14 years old when the authorities decided to implement the brainwashing education, force every student not only love the country but also loyal to the communist regime. I just found the student activist group opposed this evil policy, and to mobilize more than 100,000 Hong Kongers surrounded the government headquarters and urged the government to withdraw the evil curriculum.
And one thing that I read is that you were diagnosed with dyslexia in your early childhood. Did that at all affect your life and work as a political activist? And if so, how?
That did not really affect me a lot. And it also just triggered me realizing that instead of following the traditional path to be the professionals or work inside the government or work in the business sector, if we want to make change in the society, we can act differently.
Joshua, you just talked about it. You were 15 when you founded Scholarism, then 22, I believe, when you became the Secretary General of Demosisto. And you're a young leader and activist like Greta Thunberg, for example, as well. I wonder if there's something that makes young leaders particularly effective. Do you think it might be due to, you know, a kind of unbridled idealism that older generations, having come to terms with realpolitik and pragmatism, are no longer able to muster?
I would say that compared to a lot of youngsters in Hong Kong, the price I pay is just a small piece of cake. I hope to give some up-to-date figure. Among 1,600 protesters in Hong Kong under prosecution, 88 are in detention, 99 are sentenced to imprisonment, and 12 are detained in mainland China. And in Hong Kong, only 7 million population, with 10,000 people were arrested. The youngest one at the age of 11, and the oldest one at the age of 84. So I think I'm not really the unique one, because a lot of the youngsters in Hong Kong, even they're younger than me, belongs to the Gen X or millennials, they sacrifice more. And a few days ago, I just have lunch with one of the young activists at the age of 18, and he was just fired by live round by riot police on last October during the Chinese National Day. So I think the threat that we experience just trigger our stronger determination to continue the fight.
So you were talking about being arrested. You were jailed several times. You spent once, I believe, up to 8 consecutive months in prison. How did you experience your time in prison, and what has it taught you about yourself?
The experience in prison is really the difficult times. It keep me distant out from the society, but it also triggered me to realize that we need to overcome the fear. And even they can lock up our body, but they can't lock up our mind.
So with the movement that you're part of, that you're leading, what do you think makes movements effective? How do you organize? How much of it is self-organization? And how do you maintain coherence over a prolonged period of time?
I'm not the commander of the movement, but I'm just one of the activists that hope to let the voice of Hong Kong is being heard around the world. And I think how and why the movement will go forward and continue the momentum, most of the time is the crackdown from the authorities. As we all know, China is the largest authoritarian regime in the world and continue to silence the voice of dissidents. And greater suppression will just result in greater intention for Hong Kongers to fight back. And that's the reason for us stay and fight and hope to let our voice to call for democracy being heard around the world.
So we're here at the House of Beautiful Business. So we'd love to hear also your view on business. Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong recently stated in a public memo that political activism is a distraction for mission-driven companies. Do you agree with that? And what do you think is the responsibility for business in terms of democracy?
As we all know that in the global community for the business market, it faces lots of differences compared to what experienced in the previous few years. But I think it's really important for people to realize that since the outbreak of COVID-19, we can't take it for granted or expect things will still remain as usual. Especially, I think, as I've mentioned about how the COVID-19 outbreak really changed Hong Kong a lot. And I also would like to emphasize one of the key points of my expectation to the business sector. Because in the previous day, when we talk about a trade deal or negotiation, always is just a matter of politician or business sector. But I think from my experience, I think activists also have a say on it. And I think it's time for business must keep pushing for freedom, and the pandemic offers companies a chance to take stock. It is a good moment for executives to begin gradually rebalancing their business and investment portfolios, and local and overseas companies should consider diversifying their market and to avoid over-dependence on China. And no matter on Blizzard, on NBA, or how the Disney movie of Mulan, I think those examples also imply how the political censorship in China is not only affecting people in China, but also affecting the business market.
Talking about some of the products of US soft power makes us also wonder about the upcoming presidential election in the United States. How do you see the world change after it, and how will it affect you and your cause?
Supporting Hong Kong should not be the matter of left or right, it's the matter of right or wrong. And I believe no matter who become the president, and the liberal democracy should consider banding together to offer protection to individual companies that find themselves trapped in fight with Beijing. So no matter Trump or Biden, I think they should aware that how China already become the problem and the threat to the world. And no matter the hardline crackdown against the anti-young generation in Hong Kong, the systematic human rights abuse over Xinjiang, or how when Chinese authorities have proven themselves completely unreliable to foster a sustainable international business environment and trade relationship. I think other than political freedom, even if we just talk about economic freedom or the sustainable business environment, is still a matter for world leaders not only rely on dialogue, but hold China's accountability.
So on the note of world leaders, Fortune magazine named you one of the world's greatest leaders. What kind of leader do you think does the 21st century need, and what are the main qualities? And are there any other leaders that you admire?
I would say that it's really my pleasure to be nominated, but I know almost the only reason behind for me to be nominated is the sacrifice and the courage of Hong Kongers in the previous few years, how they continue the protest on street and to prove that kowtow to China is not the only way out. So I'm just among one of them, and there's no reason for me to regret. And I think the quality behind is about how we enhance the sense of belongings of ourselves towards our hometown, which means Hong Kong, and also how we recognizing those universal values that we cherish Actions speak louder than words, and it's important for us to take action.
And for you, for yourself and your life, do you have a vision for where you want to be or where you will be when you're, say, 40 years old, maybe?
I just Hong Kong can be Hong Kong again. And Hong Kong is the place that I born, I live, and I love. Even after the national security law is implemented, as the one who have been arrested for 10 times and being jailed for 3 times, my personal safety and my personal freedom might be running out of time already. But I think my wish is with the spirit of Hong Konger, one day Hong Kong can be Hong Kong again.
And what advice would you give for future generations?
For the future generation, I think that take action is the most important issue, and never hesitate to voice out and to show your engagement in the civil society. For the upper class elites, always they will provide lots of excuse or reason to explain that it's not our business and we should not participate in it. But I think as the one who live in the society, I just hope the young generation can determine the future instead of our future being dominated by those upper class elites.
When you look back on your work, Joshua, over the past few years, would you, taking stock, how much have you accomplished in your own review of your activism?
It's not my activism, it's the activism and the sacrifice of Hong Kong. And our battle still continue. And I hope one day Hong Kong people can elect their government to choose the leader of the administration instead of being handpicked by Beijing and the leader of Hong Kong just be the puppet of the communist China.
And then the last question for you, we're here with the House of Beautiful Business community. It's an international audience. Is there anything else you would like our community here at the House of Beautiful Business to know?
Stand with Hong Kong is much more than just a mere slogan. We urge the free world to stand together with us in resisting the autocratic Chinese regime. In Hong Kong, information is increasingly censored because we've lost the freedom of speech. And that's something we can no longer speak of. But I'm not deterred whenever I think of fellow protesters who are struggling in detention in Hong Kong or in mainland China. They are the ones who need your attention more than anyone. If I'm sent to jail or even brought to China, I sincerely hope that the world will keep a close watch on and divert the attention to the 12 young activists and the development of the Hong Kong. Please pass our devotion on and do as much as you can to stand with people of Hong Kong.
Thank you so much, Joshua, for taking the time.